Hello and welcome to part 2 of this video series covering Dell SC Series and VMware Site Recovery Manager 6.1. In part 1 we covered VMware Site Recovery Manager and Dell SC Series integration and architecture, as well as the deployment and configuration of the storage replication adapter on the SRM servers. In part 2 we'll head back into the lab and configure our protection groups, our recovery plans, and we'll run a test of the recovery plan. We're back in the lab in our vSphere web client. Let's go and configure our protection groups. Clicking on Site Recovery Manager, I'll first go to the array-based replication and look at the array managers, and we'll take a look at the devices that are replicating that we'll use as the foundation for our protection groups. My production site is running a storage center named SC12, and it is replicating to a storage center at the DR site named SC13. So looking at the replicated devices on SC12, we're actually going to use two data stores named SRM DS1 and SRM DS2. We'll click on Protection Groups and we'll add our first protection group. Let's call this one Domain Controllers. And we'll say our domain controllers reside on SRM DS1. Let's add our second protection group. We'll call this one SQL Servers. Our SQL Servers reside on VMFS Data Store SRM DS2. We now have our two protection groups created. We can look at the virtual machines that are in each protection group by highlighting the protection group and looking at virtual machines under related objects. These are our domain controllers, and our SQL servers running inside of virtual machines are under the SQL servers protection group. So you can see we've got in this particular demo we've got 4 virtual machines that we're going to recover or protect using 2 different protection groups. Now we need to create the corresponding recovery plans for these protection groups. To do that, we'll click on Recovery Plans and we'll add our recovery plan. First one will be for domain controllers. Our recovery site, or DR site, in this case is VC Site 2. And the protection group that we're going to lever for our domain controllers is called the Domain Controllers Protection Group. And you can see here the group type is ABR, which signifies array-based replication. Storage Center integration with SRM supports all available types of replication that Storage Center supports. So asynchronous replication, 2 different types of synchronous replication, high availability and a high consistency mode, as well as live volume. Next, finish. And our first recovery plan is created. Now let's go create our second recovery plan for SQL servers. We'll click next. VC Site 2 is our DR site. And we'll choose the SQL servers protection group. Again, that's using array-based replication. Click next, and finish. As you can see, both my protection groups and my recovery plans are now created. It's fairly simple to set up protection groups and recovery plans in Site Recovery Manager. With our protection groups and recovery plans created, let's actually go to our DR site vCenter server and ensure that our placeholder virtual machines have been created by Site Recovery Manager. I'm logged into my vSphere web client at the DR site. I'll click on Hosts and Clusters. And down below in the list, it's a little hard to identify, but we can see that we've got 4 virtual machines with the prefix of SRM VM 01 through 04. These identify the placeholder virtual machines that were created by Site Recovery Manager when we set up our protection groups. So let's go ahead and run a test of our recovery plans. We'll do this via the vSphere web client. I'll click on Site Recovery. I'll click on Recovery Plans. And the first recovery plan that will run will be the domain controllers. I'll highlight the domain controllers recovery plan, and we can see under step 8, we're going to recover 2 virtual machines and power them on. So I'll click the green arrow, which is a test. I already know that I've got a number of snapshots from our array-based replication at the DR site, so I don't need to, for this test, to take another snapshot and replicate it. So I'm going to untick that box, click Next, and finish. We can see on step 4, which is currently running, the step is labeled Create Writable Storage Snapshot. What's happening here is the Dell SC Series storage related component of this recovery plan, which is to mount up what's called a view volume from the array-based snapshots that have been replicated to the DR site. Once the snapshots or view volumes are mounted and discovered at the destination DR vSphere cluster hosts, steps 5 through 8 will basically execute, and basically it'll skip right to step 8, which is the powering on of the 2 virtual machines, in this case our domain controllers at the DR site. And the test is complete. The virtual machines have been powered on. We'll verify that in a moment. We can see that we started the execution of this test plan at approximately 2:44 p.m. and it completed at, we'll call it just about 2:46 p.m. So it took about 2 minutes to actually execute and run our DR plan, the test of our domain controllers. I'll go ahead and start the test plan for the SQL servers right now, and then we'll take a look and see if our domain controllers are powered on at our DR site. Once again, I don't need to replicate the latest snapshot to our DR site for our SQL servers. I'll click Next and finish. So let's go to our DR site, click refresh here, and our domain controllers, I can see here, are powered on. It's indicated by SRM VM01 and 02. Let's just take a look at the first domain controller, and we can tell from looking at the thumbnail that it looks like it's powered on. Let's go ahead and launch the remote console. And it is indeed powered on. If we hit the Control-Alt-Delete, it's ready for a user login. Can take a look at the second VM. And it's also ready and waiting at a Control-Alt-Delete login prompt. Our DR plan test for the SQL servers is still running. It's on the Create Writable Storage Snapshot step. Let's go back to our domain controllers recovery plan, and we can just verify the history that we ran the test. Again, it started, we get a summary here, it started at 2:44 p.m. and that plan was executed in approximately 1 minute and 56 seconds. So this right here is essentially our RTO, our recovery time objective. Just about 2 minutes to recover 2 virtual machines. Now obviously, if we had a larger number of protection groups and recovery plans, as well as virtual machines in those recovery plans, if we had to do things like changing IP addresses of the virtual machines or doing any kind of customization there, if we had any kind of dependencies built in for virtual machine power on order, that RTO value or that RTO component, the recovery time objective, would increase somewhat. So it's not to say that every Site Recovery Manager test plan or test recovery plan will take 2 minutes to run. Mileage may vary. Looks like our SQL Server recovery plan is finished, and let's look at the history of that for that. Started at 2:46 and 46 seconds, and this one actually finished a little quicker, 1 minute and 34 seconds. Not bad. Let's go make sure our SQL servers are up and running at our DR site. I'll click refresh, and I can see virtual machines 3 and 4, which represents our SQL servers. Those have been powered on. If I launch the remote console, here's the first SQL server. It is indeed at a Control-Alt-Delete prompt, as is probably our last SQL server. And it is. Okay. I'm going to assume that our test was successful. Now normally at this point, all 4 of these virtual machines are running in a test bubble network. We could furthermore log into those virtual machines, run some additional tests that are specific for our environment, our applications, our network, our storage, and so forth. But at this point, I'm going to assume all of that's done, and I'm going to call this test a success. So now we'll run the cleanup, and it really doesn't matter what order we run this in, because we're just going to tear down all those virtual machines, and we'll leverage the steps that, or the workflow that Site Recovery Manager will provide for us. So we'll just do this in reverse order. We'll run the cleanup on the SQL servers first. We'll click on the little broom there. We'll run our cleanup, hit next, and finish. What that'll do is power down the virtual machines and put them back into a placeholder VM state. It'll tear down the test bubble network, and it'll dismount the view volumes from the vSphere host for the associated data stores. I can run the cleanup for the domain controller's recovery plan simultaneously. So we'll do that. Click next, finish. So that cleanup is running. We can see the steps for a cleanup plan are a little bit different than an actual recovery plan. You can see we're discarding the storage as part of, well, it looks like we're already done actually. It finished before I could even finish talking about it. The SQL Server recovery plan has been cleaned up. It is now ready for our next execution of a test, which could be tomorrow, could be next week, could be next month, or next quarter. The domain controller recovery plan looks like it is also cleaned up. We can validate that in the history again. We can see that we ran our test a few minutes ago, and then we ran our cleanup. Both were successful. And by the way, these historical steps and these plans, when they were run, can be exported to a document that can be circulated to management showing that the DR plan was run. We just highlight over the export report icon at the top of the page. If we go back to our DR site, hit the refresh button, we should see that the placeholder VMs have been put back into TAC. They're powered off. In fact, they don't even exist at this point. They're just placeholders for resources to be powered on and reserved at the DR site. So you can see that they're not powered on at this point. Okay, that concludes part 2 of this video series covering VMware Site Recovery Manager 6.1 and Dell SC Series storage. For more information on Dell SC Series storage, please visit Dell Tech Center, and thank you very much for watching.